So today I'm going to do something slightly different. Instead of writing a blog post, I'm recording this video because it makes more sense to show you visually how I work with my projects and how I set them up so that I can reduce the cognitive overhead I have between switching among different projects or different clients. So if you haven't seen my blog posts yet, I encourage you to check them out, especially to understand how I work on multiple branches in parallel, for example, without using git stash. And there's quite a bit of other stuff that is relevant as well. But let me show you what each individual project and each individual branch within a project looks like from a developer experience perspective, so that I can just jump into a project, run a command, and I'm up and running and everything looks the same. So first things first, we are looking at my project here checked out on my local computer. This is the project template that I will open source together with this video. So first things first, if we look in here, I do check out my individual branches using git work tree. I talked about that in a previous blog post, so check it out. So we're going to switch into the main branch here. And the only thing I can do here now is I can just run Devbox run tmux. Give that a go. That fires up the tmux session here. And you can see I now have 6 different panes. On the left side, we're going to look into them in just a minute. On the right side, I give myself 3 empty terminals where I can run arbitrary commands if I have to do so. Different projects have different needs of what I need to run. So that gives me a bit of real estate here to do these kind of things. But where it gets interesting is on the left, I always have the same 3 tools running. And that really helps navigate projects and get files committed, work with PRs and whatnot. So let's go through that top to bottom so that you have an overview of what these tools are, why they're here. And then after that, I'm going to show you how this is all configured and how you can customize it to your needs. So first things first, at the top left, we have the GitHub or GH- extension that is basically a GitHub dashboard as a terminal user interface. So we can zoom in here and make this pane that you saw full screen, so we have a bit more real estate. Now what you see here is basically just a view of my GitHub environment. You can create various tabs at the top here. So you can see there's things that need my review. There's my open pull requests, and currently that's selected, so I can press D to look at the diff of that specific command. I can do code review, see what changed, and if I'm happy with that, then I can leave a comment, I can approve it, I can merge the PR, all kind of stuff that I don't need to switch between my terminal and the web browser to deal with GitHub's web UI. If you don't know what the commands are or you forgot, then you can just do shift / so with a question mark, and you get all the keyboard shortcuts at the bottom. You can see there at the bottom here, I can do all various kind of stuff with these PRs. There's also a way to switch to issues for that specific project. So you just press S, and then you can look at the issues that I'm involved in or I created. So back to pull requests. This basically just lets me navigate GitHub from my terminal. I don't need to open a browser window and do context switching there. All right, let's switch back. The next thing I want to show you is at the bottom left. So we're going to go down here and we're going to look at that. And again, let's make this full screen. This is called Process Compose. And at the moment, it just runs a little info here to tell you how to change these commands. But think of Process Compose as something like Docker Compose, but without Docker, right? So anything my projects do, like installing dependencies, preparing the database, running a database seed script, starting development servers, building shared libraries in a monorepo. Like any step like that that's required for my project to get up and running is configured as a separate process. So where you currently see info, there will be many processes listed here, and they can depend on each other too, right? So for example, before I can build a core library that's shared among multiple services, I need to install the dependencies. So there would be like, let's say, a cargo fetch or an npm install, and that would run. And only when that finishes successfully will the next step continue. And at some point when all the libraries are built, all the stuff is compiled, I can then have a command or a process here that starts up the web application, the backend services, and does all kind of stuff. The nice thing about this UI is that I also get the logs of each service right here. So I can look at them, I can switch between services. I can easily restart a service by just hitting Control R, and that will basically just kill the server, restart it. Or if I want to reseed my database, for example, because I messed something up or I want to retest from scratch, I can select the database seed process, Control R, it reruns that and it reseeds the database so that I don't have to, do any of that stuff manually. So this is Process Compose. It comes built in with Devbox. Remember at the beginning I ran Devbox, run tmux. So we're going to look at Devbox in just a second, but just know that Process Compose is a separate tool, but it's bundled into Devbox. All right, let's switch back to our overview. And then what I have here in the middle, this is my nvim editor where I write my code. If you use VS Code or Cursor or whatever, then you just would change your config and fire up that external editor instead of nvim that I do here. So let's go back and have a look at what the source code for this project looks like and how we can configure it. Let's go full screen. So the entry point for all of that is this devbox.json file. And what you see here is basically a very easy to understand JSON file. The couple of key things here. So first thing is a packages array here that tells Devbox which dependencies are required for my project to run. Now this is just a template, so there's bare minimum required. But let's say you're building an application that has a Postgres database and maybe a web framework in the front end that needs Node.js or Rust or whatever you need. You can configure these packages here, and anytime somebody opens your project, the only thing they need to have installed on their computer is Devbox. They don't need Node, they don't need Rust, they don't even need Postgres, they just need Devbox. And when they start the project, then the Process Compose at the bottom left will have access to all the dependencies that are required because we configured them in this packages array within the devbox.json file. The next thing we want to look at is down here in the shell object. We have something called an init hook. So anytime we run a command or we open a shell in Devbox with all these packages installed, that init hook executes. Now, what this init hook does here specifically is it uses the GH CLI, which is the GitHub CLI. You can see on line, or just 4 lines up here, we installed the GitHub CLI. We told Devbox we need that GH CLI. So now down here it's available and we can just check if we already authenticated, so GH auth status. And if we are authenticated, then we are not doing anything. But if we are not, then we run the login command and make sure that the current user is authenticated to GitHub. The reason we do that is because of the next line. This is where we install a GitHub CLI extension called gh dash, and that extension is what I showed you at the very beginning at the top left of my terminal. This is how I use GitHub from my terminal instead of using the web interface. So again, just regular bash. We are checking the list of extensions, and if we find gh dash, then we do nothing. If we don't find it, we install it, so that anybody who works on this project has these tools available if they choose to use them. Lastly, we have a scripts object, and there's the tmux script that I ran initially to set everything up and get the UI going. And all we do here is we just do a tmuxp, which we installed higher up. You can see in the packages array. And then I provide a config file to tmuxp that specifies the layout with the 2x3 grid that we saw at the beginning. So let me jump into some of the configurations so that you get an idea of how this looks like. Going back here, we have some hidden files, so I'm going to show them. I tend to move my config files into a .config directory just so that my project root is not as messy as in many other projects. So we have a Devbox config directory. In here we have the process compose. We'll look at that in a second. We also have a tmux directory with tmuxp. You can see this is the file we specify here. So let's follow the flow and go through how this works. So tmuxp is a very basic YAML file where we just specify, let's go up here, 13. So we have the windows, and then we have a layout where we say tiled. The documentation gives you more options on what the layouts are available. But then basically we just have our panes and we execute the shell command. So here we run the gh dash with its own config file, so that if you want to configure gh dash for a specific project, you can do that easily here. And then we have some empty terminal on the right, and then on the left again we run nvim in my case, or you can run code dot or whatever you want to start for your project. And then on the right left side at the very bottom, so the third row on the first column, we have that process compose file that we spin up. So the Devbox services up is the default command, and we specify our own compose file. And if we look at that, then it's under config Devbox process compose. Here I link to the documentation at the top, but this is where we specify our processes. That's what I mentioned earlier with the dependency installation for this specific project, seeding the database, all that stuff. And again, do make sure you read the docs. There's a lot of important information, such as health checks, readiness probes you can set up, and you can make this very robust and very useful. Okay, so this is really just an overview of the template I use to apply to the projects that I'm involved in, and this lets anybody basically just spin that up. Now, there's situations where not everybody wants to use tmux, for example, right? People may want to have their own workflow. They may be more productive with other ways of working. So that's no problem either. We can, let me get out of here. If we are in that project, then we don't have to use Devbox run tmux. We can just do Devbox shell and spin that up. So now we are in a Devbox shell, which means we have access to the dependencies that this project needs. And now from here, anybody can work in whatever way they want, and they don't have to worry about installing any dependencies or having the right version of the dependencies. Everything just there for them to use. So for example, if we use gh help, we get that output here. But if we get out of this Devbox shell, so we go back to the regular shell, and I say gh help, then it says GitHub CLI is not found, right? Because I don't have gh installed on my system globally. I only have gh installed when I use a Devbox shell for that specific project, which means if I go to another project that uses a different version of GH or a different version of Postgres, the right version of that tool will be available to me. So to summarize, I have Devbox run tmux available in all my projects, personal and for work. And this really helps me to fire this up, and then I know exactly that top left I have my PRs, bottom left I have all the services related to that project, and on the right side I have some terminals where I can run different commands. Good. Yeah, with that, gives you a good idea. Definitely reach out. You can find me at Moo Today on Twitter /X, or reach out in any way you want to learn more if you're curious. And then I will publish that repo as part of this video announcement, so you can use that as a template and adjust to your needs. Awesome. Yeah, thanks very much. See you later. Bye.